Now, for our opening keynote, we are very honored and excited to have Dr. Anand Deshpande, Chairman and Managing Director of Persistent Systems, in conversation with Avanish Sahai, a leader in building partner ecosystems at Salesforce, ServiceNow, and Google. They'll share stories and insights from their own STEM journey through many decades of professional success, bringing them to today, where they are giving back to family, community, and society. Over to you, Avanish.
Great. Hey, thank you, Maya, and thank you all for the amazing introductions. I am absolutely delighted to introduce a dear friend. We've known each other for over 20 years now, and he's probably one of the luminaries of STEM all around. So with that, Anand, I'd love to hear a bit about your journey from STEM, starting from STEM and persistent to where you are today.
Thanks, Avanish. It's a real pleasure to be in this forum today for two reasons. One, of course, I knew Joy as being someone from his batch in IIT and someone with a JE1. Of course, you know him by association for being in the batch. But of course, I met him several times afterwards while he was in the Bay Area. And he always kind of came through with his humility. And I couldn't miss this opportunity for having to do something with STEM education and what Joy Thomas Foundation is doing. So it's an honor to be here at this event. To share a bit about my journey, again, all of us from the batch and pretty much all of us from IIT who came in the early 80s, we were very fortunate to have had a very effective but very inexpensive education while in IIT. I still remember having paid just 200 rupees a year for being a student at IIT in Kharagpur. And it was so effective, and the 5 years that we spent out there made a huge difference to our life. And I'm really delighted that we are looking at supporting many students now, even though the college education in India has become far more expensive than it used to be when we were there. Going further on my journey, I came to the US, spent 5 years here in Bloomington, Indiana, did a PhD, worked at Hewlett-Packard Laboratories for about 18 months, and then went back to India and started Persistent in 1990. It was pretty much the early days of the tech industry. As they say, the software business in India at that time was about $50 million worldwide from India. And from India, if those of you who were with us in college will remember, even making a phone call was a pretty tricky job at that point. So trying to do a software business at that time was pretty much idiotic or stupid and all of those above. And sometimes when you are stupid, that's when you do these kinds of things. So I'm not going to belabor a whole lot about the early days, but over the last 32 years of business, Persistent has grown to be $1 billion business now. And we employ more than 22,000 people. And that has helped us do many things in the community as well. For the last 3 years, I moved from being CEO of the business to being chairman. And I sort of was looking at saying that having spent 30 years of just running around, running the shop in a way and being on the treadmill, I figured it was time to move on and do something different. And since we are here as friends of Joy, I presume all of us are sort of in that 60 plus minus zone. And I thought it would be good to share a bit about how we can try to do something more and beyond the corporate and professional lives that all of us were very fortunate to have had a good opportunity through the college education that we did, and how we could make an impact to the next generation of students and other people that we can help. So I have been working predominantly in 3 areas. One of them is to do with entrepreneurship. The second group is around data, and the third one is around education, mainly higher education and things like that. And Avanish, I've known you now for a long time as well, and I know you've been on a similar mission and a journey. So I wanted to while we start talking about some of the things that we are doing in related areas, I thought I'd get you to share a bit about how you have migrated from being a high power executive in various companies to being on the philanthropy side. And maybe you should share your journey, and then we can connect the two dots and move on forward.
Well, thank you, Anand. Yeah, and appreciate that. So I also have a STEM journey. However, mine is a little bit different. I was born in India, but I actually moved to Brazil as a 5-year-old. So my STEM journey started in Brazil. I did also get an electrical engineering degree from University of São Paulo in Brazil, and also came to the US. In my case, I came to Boston in the late 80s to get my master's in computer engineering, always with an intention of going back. But one thing led to the other, and now it's been 33, 34 years since I've been here. And on that journey, have worked at places like Oracle, where I started out as an engineer and then moved into product. Then went and got my MBA, which I think is an interesting combination for people with STEM backgrounds, the analytical skills within more the business skills. We can talk more about that. Then I spent a number of years in management consulting at a company called McKinsey & Company, which is one of the large consulting firms, including building their STEM-focused service line to serve software companies. And then the next few years I spent in somewhat like Jay, somewhat like you, Anand, in the early days, in building companies. And that is, I think, one of the things that I really enjoy about being in STEM is coming up with ideas, being persistent and persevere like you have, and create companies and help them grow from, idea to real company and scale. So I did that for about 10 years, which is when we first met, by the way, I think one of them. And then for the last 12, 13 years, I spent time at Salesforce when it was a 3,500 person company. And that grew from being very small to being over $1.5 billion when I was there, to ServiceNow, another major software company with a lot of things going on also in India. And then most recently, I led the partner ecosystem for Google Cloud. Again, another journey of a very strong brand, strong company, building a new business inside that. And somewhat like you, but maybe not as much, I've also retired. So now I'm really focused on giving back, and I'd love to talk more about that as well. So
Great.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you started talking a bit about this, right? And I think Maya teed it up as well, giving back to family, to community, to society. Talk a bit about some of the things that you are doing and how are you spending your time? How are you dedicating your time in this next phase of the journey?
Right. So I'm, again, in the experiment mode at the moment is what I would say. When you're running a shop for pretty much 24/7, when you start looking at new things, you always feel like you have more bandwidth to do things. So I'm right now experimenting and trying out a whole bunch of things. But I'm going to share about 2 projects that I think I would love to get, some ideas and suggestions as well. So one of them is what we refer to as the Asra Foundation. So D is for Deshpande and ASRA are the initials of the family members. And we are focused on helping really small businesses. So we call them nano entrepreneurs. These are businesses between 5 lakhs and 1 crore. So that would be very small from the dollar conversion type of a situation. So these are self-employed businesses, typically things like beauty salons, food counters, fashion design, photographers, individuals trying to make a living. And I find that in India right now, if you look at the demographics, we have 40 or so, and for every age, we need to have at least 2.5 million jobs, and 25 million jobs. And to get to those many jobs, I think getting people to be self-employed is going to be the critical thing. And that's why our focus on the Asra Foundation is to help people become self-employed. I know it's a little bit beyond STEM, but the fact is that, I believe that if young people have jobs and work to do, then they're more likely to be more productive, more good things happen when people have jobs. And from where I'm sitting in India, that's become a big issue. And the other project I want to share very briefly at this moment, and we can come back to them, and you have some interesting things as well, is that I'm trying to build a community of, so here's how it happened. I started to work with a bunch of saying that, okay, healthcare data may be something interesting. And I started to talk to people on both sides, and I found that we don't really talk to each other as well in India. So we have the medical doctors who do observational research with clinical practices. And then you have the computer science people who do data research and data sets that are published data sets that you can download from the US standard data set places. But the doctors don't talk to the people who can do the science and analytics. So I've been trying to build a community that includes medical doctors, computer science professors, philanthropists, and government officials to try to build out programs, one for cancer data research and for diabetes data research. So as I sort of indulge into some of these things, I find that what we have all learned in business can be deployed to some of these more interesting and more important clauses. And as I look at my first 30 years as being persistent, as I look for the next 30 years and I want to see how to make a difference and make an impact. And I find that having spent 30 years and with the credibility that one has, it is something that we can leverage and put to use. So I'm very excited, and I want to encourage all of us in my sort of our age group and batchmates to explore ways of how we can make a difference as we look at our next 30 years and rather than looking at the next few. And I know, Avanish, you've been trying out some very interesting experiments. So I would love to have you talk a bit about them and maybe share your experience and how we can learn from each other.
Yeah, no, for sure. And again, amazing initiatives you're driving. So there's two things I will also talk about. One is, as I mentioned, last many years, I spent time at Salesforce, ServiceNow, Google, helping them think about their platform, right, which is really a core technology, and their platform strategy. And one of the things I've started doing is in the way of giving back to my community of similarly focused people who are building partnerships, building technology platforms, et cetera. How do you help them learn? And so in order to do that, I've started publishing a number of articles, hosting a podcast. So this is not to make money. This is really to bring lessons learned, figure out what are some of the areas that we, maybe learned good things, some things that we did, maybe made mistakes, and bring that back to the community so that the next set of entrepreneurs, business people, partnership managers, et cetera, can learn from that. So that is one form of giving, right? We talk about giving in the form of time, talent, and treasure. So this one, I'm certainly trying to bring some time and some of my experiences from a talent perspective back to that. The other one, which I'm very passionate about, and I think ties very closely to what the Thomas Foundation is doing as well, is, like I said, I've been here as an immigrant to the US for 30 plus years. And one of the things I noticed, and we collectively have as Indian entrepreneurs, Indian businessmen, we have done things like automation. We've done things like offshoring, like outsourcing, right? It's a great business and it helps all of us. What we don't do is frequently understand the impact on professionals here, let's say in the US, for example. So one of the things I'm doing now is working with an organization called Indiaspora, which is part of the Indian diaspora, and in fact, very involved with Joy Thomas Foundation as well. And we have launched an initiative called Collective Careers. And this is to bring the insights of both STEM, and I'll call it STEM-enabled careers, to people that may be working in a factory in the US, they may be working in a mine. And how do we help them find their next career? If that factory has been shut down and moved to Mexico, moved to Southeast Asia or China, they need a new career. They need a new job. How do we help train them? How do we help them understand what those jobs of the future are so they can get the next career? So this is, again, part of giving back to the society we live in and helping people understand that there will be a future and we can actually help them by understanding what those futures are. So, Anand, I know we're about to wrap up here, but I think one of the things we want to do here is, in the spirit of inspire, nurture, mentor, is describe a little bit of how do we give back? How do we help people think about getting engaged and giving back to their societies, communities, et cetera? Talk a bit about that from your point of view. You're doing so many different things.
Yeah, it's a good question, Avanish. I'm still trying to figure all this stuff out, and I find I'm experimenting a lot. But there is a few things to do. One is, of course, what I find is that from our corporate experience and having worked in corporations and running businesses, we know how to build teams together. So creating a mission, driving people to work together is something that we all can do very naturally. And that's something that I think in this nonprofit sector is always missing. People are in the mission mode, but they're not very well organized, and helping them organize is one way to give back. The second, of course, important thing is funding. And again, we can be smart about how we can fund some of these activities. And I think if we all come together, and that's why I find Joy Thomas Foundation as an exciting platform, is if we all work together and give together, we could probably do some interesting things as well. The last thing I want to mention, which is, I think, a good way to get the Joy Thomas Foundation's students or people who you support to get involved and to make a self-perpetuating organization in some sense. And this is something that we are trying to do with the Deasra Foundation, where we have about 200,000 small businesses we have supported. Our goal is to get these small businesses to support other businesses as they go along. So if we started to create a model or a flywheel of saying, how do you get everyone to pay forward in small ways if in the beginning, but eventually start to do more and more, then you can get everyone to feel like it's not just a one-way street I take, but I also have to give to someone else. And you keep this moving. That's how we can make this all work for everyone. And I think Joy has been an inspiration for all of us all through our last 60 years that we have been around. And I think he continues to be an inspiration for all of us. So I think we should take advantage of the fact that we all have something in common. That is, we are all inspired by Joy, and see how we can learn from that and inspire each other as well, and to inspire a broader community. There is a lot we can do together. And I would be happy to take questions in the future. My email address is anand@persistent.com. I know we don't have time today, but if you write to me, I'd be happy to get back and see how we could do something together.
Well, Anand, as always, it's so insightful to hear from you. Thank you for your time and generosity. And with that, back to you, Maya.
Hey, Anand and Avanish, thank you so much for treating us to a fascinating conversation. It was a privilege to listen to you. We're very inspired by your bold and generous initiatives to paying it forward.